Hi, everyone. This will be my last lecture for our intro class, and it will set up the question that you'll be answering for your final 2 to 3 page paper. Throughout this term, we've talked about COVID-19 and how religious groups respond to that. And I think through your papers, I've seen the responses of a number of churches. And one thing I'd say is that um, a lot the response that churches have often depends on the infrastructure that they have going into the crisis. And the LDS church was exceptionally well positioned to deal with a crisis like this. They had, as we heard from the missionaries, and then I went and looked online to kind of confirm it and learn more about it. In 2019, a program called Come Follow Me, which was a study at home set of books and videos and questions for kind of homes, families to work through. So in a lot of ways, they've got so much infrastructure online that when COVID-19 comes, the LDS church is able to just kind of put that front and center and say, well, this replaces church for now. And they, if you look online, there's all kinds of ways that they kind of are working around COVID-19 and um, not trying to come back early, or kind of buck the rules that are out there from government and the guidance from the CDC, but they're rather relying on this kind of online infrastructure. So it's a really interesting case study in handling COVID-19. But, we've had we're past a week now of very intense discussions of Black Lives Matter, which is related to the economic and health consequences of COVID-19, but was particularly stirred by the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis. And we're seeing all around the world, not just in the US, um, protests concerning police violence and broader social issues around race. And I thought here at the end of the class, let's have this final paper, final response be on racism. And the LDS Church is a really interesting group to look at through that lens. I've kind of mentioned that in the discussions in the sections yesterday, but I want to go a little bit deeper into that. And then I'm also going to put two short articles online for you to look at, and that'll be the basis, along with this lecture, for your final paper. One thing I like to do is give students a taste of the Book of Mormon. I think there's a tendency when we talk with the missionaries for the Book of Mormon to be kind of a prop. And we've actually had an amazing example of how a sacred book can be used as a prop this week with Trump's very strange kind of walking out in front of the White House and then just kind of holding up a Bible, right? There's a sense in which that sacred texts function as props more than the contents of the text, which we often defer to when we're reading the Ramayana or the Bible. We read the text and talk about it and talk about the kind of the gray areas and questions that are raised by the stories. But sometimes it's just kind of held up as a sacred symbol to rally around. So what I want to do is look at the text itself and think about what this text is saying about history. We, going back to the very beginning of this class, we talked about religion as a system of symbols. And it's one of the things it does is help to kind of sketch out a general order of existence. It makes sense of the world that we live in. And the Book of Mormon is extremely effective at that. It takes a little bit of imagination because you kind of have to get your head back into the 19th century. But once you do that, I think you'll see the extent to which it kind of connects the dots and makes people feel like they're living in a place and a time that is extremely important. And let me show you how that goes. Now, this is just a little bit of a warning. There's also going to be some clear racist language that we look at in this, especially directed towards Native Americans. But I think it's important to get this picture of the Book of Mormon. Let me also just say one thing. I'm not holding up the LDS Church as being uniquely racist. I think that there's lots of religious institutions that have to deal with these kinds of questions of, and I just want to acknowledge that, and that's something that institutions have to work through. Let me share my screen, and then we'll talk through the a passage from the Book of Mormon. Okay, one thing you'll see in the Book of Mormon is a series of illustrations. And this is one, kind of a picture says 1,000 words, but this is Jesus appearing to people in the New World. So he is in, obviously Jerusalem, and that's where he's going to die and be resurrected. But then when that is all done, over in the kind of the old world, I guess you'd say, he comes to the Americas and he appears to the people here. So you can see kind of the Mayan pyramids in the background, the kind of, we're in Central America, and this is Jesus appearing to the Jewish people who have now, come up with pre-Columbian Native American culture, but that's what we're looking at. And Jesus appears here and gives his message and his gospel. Now, if you go, as I mentioned, the LDS Church is extremely good when it comes to online resources, and they've got all their books up there. So Old Testament, New Testament, Book of Mormon, then Doctrine and Covenants, Pearl of Great Price, and then Study Helps. And then, they've got so many resources for study. It's a really amazing, and apps for your phones, and use all kinds of things that they have on their online platform. But the Book of Mormon, so if you click on that, you can move forward, and then they've got here's these books. If you know the books of the Bible, these obviously look very different. First Nephi, Second Nephi, Jacob, Enos, Jerem, Omni, Words of Mormon, all kinds of books that you might not recognize. We're going to go into First Nephi. Now, one of the interesting things about First Nephi is that it contains this kind of look to the future, the deep future. So we're sitting in like 500-600 BC, but there's going to be kind of an angel is going to show Nephi the distant future, like 2,000 years forward. And when I work through this in class with students, it's often unclear to them at first what's being talked about. But you kind of have to read between the lines to understand what the references are. And I'm going to kind of walk you through this first. It'll give you a taste of the Book of Mormon, but also I think let you see how it's allowing people to understand themselves in the 19th century. And while the angel spake these words, the Book of Mormon, even though it's from Joseph Smith in the 19th century, it has this kind of King James language. He was steeped, Joseph Smith, in the King James Bible. And so when it came to his own sacred text, it was translated or written in this kind of King James language. While the angel spake these words, I beheld and saw that the seed of my brethren did contend against my seed, according to the word of the angel. And because of the pride of my seed and the temptations of the devil, I beheld that the seed of my brethren did overpower the people of my seed. And it came to pass that I beheld and saw the people of the seed of my brethren, that they had overcome my seed, and they went forth in multitudes upon the face of the land. What's being referred to here? This is early as the Israelites, a group of Israelites, come to the New World miraculously, right? Basically in a kind of a sealed up boat that makes it to the Americas. And one of the early Israelites foresees the future in which there's going to be a divergence. There's going to be kind of the good Israelite seed and then the bad seed. And these are going to make war on each other. And this is these two references, that there are these two groups and that the bad ones are going to end up winning. Now, follow this and you'll see some of the racialized language. I saw them gathered together in multitudes, and I saw wars and rumors of wars among them, and in wars and rumors of wars I saw many generations pass away. And the angel said unto me, Behold, these shall dwindle in unbelief, And it came to pass that I beheld, after they had dwindled in unbelief, they became a dark and loathsome and a filthy people, full of idleness and all manner of abominations. So, what explains Native Americans in the 19th century, white European view? What happened? Well, they were the bad seed of the ancient Israelites. They destroyed the good seed, and in judgment, their skin color turned dark, and then also they were lazy and idle. Right? These are all very hurtful and also long-standing kinds of insults given to the Native American people, especially if you think back in the 19th century, right? And so this is kind of explaining and in some ways accepting a lot of um, the prejudice against Native Americans, but also explaining why things are that way. And it came to pass that the angel spake unto me, saying, Look, and I looked and beheld many nations and kingdoms. And the angel said unto me, What beholdest thou? And I said, I behold many nations and kingdoms. And he said unto me, These are the nations and kingdoms of the Gentiles. And it came to pass that I saw among the nations of the Gentiles the formation of a great church. And the angel said unto me, Behold, the formation of a church, which is most abominable above all other churches, which slayeth the saints of God, yea, and tortureth them, and bindeth them down, and yoketh them with a yoke of iron, and bringeth them down into captivity. So here we are. This is all taking place from the point of view of the Americas. And then the vision is of the future, centuries in the future, when to the Gentiles, to Europe, and there would be a problem. There would be a great church that would form. Now, this is the Catholic Church, and I know from many of your papers that a number of you are Catholic, and this is a very central concept in the Book of Mormon is anti-Catholicism. And then again, go back to the 19th century, you'll see lots of anti-Catholic propaganda and talk. And in fact, we really don't begin to get rid of that until you get JFK, 1960s, where there's more comfort and almost indifference to whether someone's Catholic or Protestant. But 19th century, it was a big deal. And here you have this look at the Catholic Church is going to play a very bad role in history. And you remember when our missionaries were talking about the great apostasy, and that there was like this period of time when the truth was not on the earth, and then in 1830 the truth was restored. Well, it's the Catholic Church that is kind of the bad guy in that story and the reason for the apostasy. And it came to pass, this is just continuing on in the book of Nephi, it came to pass that I beheld this great and abominable church, and I saw the devil, that he was the founder of it. I also saw gold and silver and silks and scarlets and fine twined linen and all manner of precious clothing, and I saw many harlots. This is, again, this is all about the Catholic Church as the great harlot from the book of Revelation, and, gathering gold and silk and fine things and perverting the gospel. That's what's happening here. And it came to pass that I looked and beheld many waters, and they divided the Gentiles from the seed of my brethren. And it came to pass that the angel said unto me, Behold, the wrath of God is upon the seed of thy brethren. And I looked and beheld a man among the Gentiles, who is separated from the seed of my brethren by the many waters. And I beheld the Spirit of God, that it came down and wrought upon the man, and he went forth upon the many waters, even unto the seed of my brethren, who were in the promised land. All right, what is this about? There's the waters is the Atlantic Ocean, right? So you're writing from the position of the Americas, and you're looking across the world to Europe and the Gentiles. And at this point, the Native Americans have, the bad seed has won, and that is what we know as Native Americans. And then this verse, I looked and beheld a man among the Gentiles. That's Columbus. That's Christopher Columbus, who was separated from the seed of my brethren by the many waters. The Spirit of God came down and wrought upon the man, and he went forth upon the many waters. So this is the Gentiles carrying the Bible as they had it are going to come across the Atlantic And now there's going to be meeting up with this other line of Israelites that is here in the New World. So this is Christopher Columbus. When I read this with students, everyone is kind of, what is this talking about? But it's like some light bulbs start going off when you say, this is this way of kind of talking about the history of the Americas, and this is Columbus. And it came to pass that I beheld the Spirit of God, that it wrought upon other Gentiles, and they went forth out of captivity upon the many waters. These are the pilgrims, right? So Columbus comes, things happen, and then when we're talking about what would become the United States, we're talking about the pilgrims who came out of captivity of the evil European land and came here to the Americas. And it came to pass that I beheld many multitudes of the Gentiles upon the land of promise. That's America, the land of promise. I beheld the wrath of God that was upon the seed of my brethren, and they were scattered before the Gentiles and were smitten. And I beheld that the Spirit of the Lord, that it was upon the Gentiles, they did prosper and obtain the land for their inheritance. I beheld that they were white and exceedingly fair and beautiful, like unto my people before they were slain. All right, really key things here. That when the settlers from Europe came to the Americas, they encountered the natives, the Native Americans, and those Native Americans, as kind of the bad seed of the ancient Israelites, were scattered before them. And the Gentiles, the Europeans, took the land and obtained the land. And that's all part of God's plan, right? We're still in a period when the United States is expanding with manifest destiny. And here we have a text that is saying, yes, those Native Americans were evil. They destroyed the good seed, and the Gentiles are going to take the land and obtain the land, right? The other thing is that America isn't just some addendum that nobody knew about, but is the land of promise. It's where God's word would be reestablished and in its fullness. And so there's a sense in which this isn't just an extension of the old world for these settlers, but it is the land of promise, the promised land. And I think that's another way in which the Book of Mormon sets out a history that makes sense of the world for white Europeans in the 19th century. Now, here's the thing, that you see again the racial talk here, though, that these Europeans, one thing that's good about them is that they are white and exceedingly fair and beautiful, like unto my people before they were slain. In other words, there was this good seed and bad seed in ancient Israelites that came to the Americas, and the good seed was white. They were destroyed by the bad seed, but there's kind of a restoration of whiteness that is happening here in the New World. This is what I was talking about, this kind of clearly racialized thinking and history telling. And it came to pass that I, Nephi, we're back in 600 BC, looking to the future, beheld that the Gentiles who had gone forth out of captivity did humble themselves before the Lord, and the power of the Lord was with them. So anyways, Puritans, Protestants in the Americas were good. They had a lot of good things going for them. They needed the full gospel. I beheld that their mother Gentiles were gathered together upon the waters and upon the land also to battle against them. Beheld that the power of God was with them, and also that the wrath of God was upon all those that were gathered together against them to battle. And I, Nephi, beheld that the Gentiles that had gone out of captivity were delivered by the power of God out of the hands of all other nations. Well, this is about American independence. That there were a lot of good, they didn't have the full truth yet, but they were good Gentiles, and God helped them become independent from the bad Gentiles, Catholic Church, and other bad people back in Europe. And now it came to pass that I, Nephi, beheld that they did prosper in the land, and I beheld a book, it was carried forth among them. So there's independence. People are here in the Americas, and they have a book, which is the old-fashioned Bible. Now we're going to see that there's a problem with that Bible. Verse 26 here. After they go forth by the hand of the 12 apostles of the Lamb from the Jews unto the Gentiles, thou seest the formation of that great and abominable church. So here we're again slamming the Catholic Church, which is most abominable above all other churches. For behold, they have taken away from the gospel of the Lamb many parts which are plain and most precious, and also many covenants of the Lord have they taken away. So Protestants, European Protestants in America are good, but they're carrying a Bible which has been stripped of many important things in it. So they're arguing among each other. They don't know what's true and what's not true. And they have a defective Bible. And this is going to set up the need for the discovery of the plates and Joseph Smith's translation of the Book of Mormon. And it came to pass that the angel of the Lord spake unto me, behold, saith the Lamb of God, after I have visited the remnant of the house of Israel, and this remnant of whom I speak is the seed of thy father, wherefore have I visited them in judgment and smitten them by the hand of the Gentiles. And after the Gentiles do stumble exceedingly because of the most plain and precious parts of the gospel of the Lamb, which have been kept back by that abominable church, I will be merciful unto the Gentiles in that day, insomuch that I will bring forth unto them in mine own power much of the gospel, which shall be plain and precious. So here is a prophecy within the Book of Mormon about the coming of the Book of Mormon, when the land in ancient America is populated by Gentiles from Europe. So at that point, God will bring forth and manifest himself in his fullness to the people that are inhabiting this promised land, the Americas. And that is what the Book of Mormon is. And that's the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, right? It is this restoration of the truth that had been dormant and gone in its fullness for 1,500 years, but which is now brought back in its completeness. All right, I'm going to leave the sharing here. Okay, well, that is a story. I hope you could follow that. It gives you a taste of kind of this King James style of the Book of Mormon, but also gives you a sense of how this made sense of the world to people. It told a history that was very complementary to the settlers of the New World. Explained why the natives were displaced, and that was part of God's plan. Why there's a special promise for the people who live in America, that this is the promised land. And those have been, in our discussions with the groups, we talked about what's attractive about the Mormon faith. Well, this kind of American promise and the sacredness of the New World is a big part of that. But that comes with some real problems to work through, which is racism, pure and simple. This is about Native Americans. And also let's also recognize the anti-Catholicism that's in there. But there's a lot of making sense of the world at the expense of groups that are kind of people are suspicious about and not just suspicious is too light of a word, prejudiced against in the 19th century. Now I can show you other places in some later revelations from Joseph Smith where blacks are forbidden from holding the priesthood. And so that's another story, is blacks and some of the story about slavery. So that's, but I won't go too far into that here. And this is especially about Native Americans and how to understand the Native Americans that were encountered in the 19th century. So let me stop there and say that is what your final response will be about. I'm going to put up 2 articles as well, kind of summarizing some of the legacy of race that's in the LDS Church. And what I'd like you to do is to respond to what we heard from the missionaries, but also how to think about being a part of institutions. What can be how do we respond to this kind of legacy of racism that's in our institutions? LDS Church being one, but I think you could find subtler, but nevertheless important ways in which there's racism that's embedded in many religious institutions.